Okay, I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting, budget hearings of April 15th, 2021 at 1:01 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Councillor Cassett Sanchez.
Here.
Councillor Villarreal.
Present.
Councillor Lindell.
I'm here.
Councillor Romero Worth.
I'm also here.
Great. And Councillor Beta.
Here. Okay, so we left off yesterday halfway through Public Works. So that's what we'll pick up after Public Works. We will hear HR's budget, ITT's budget, and Finance's budget. As best as we can, I would really like to try to catch up because we are today concludes 1 week. We only have a week left. We still have an opportunity, not just at council on the 28th, but if need be, that we could have some time on the 26th. So some things that I've been, I don't want to say criticized, but concerned. People have said, you know, you really got to move those meetings along and try to keep everybody on track. You're the chairman. And so I'm going to try my best to do a better job of running these meetings. So, okay, let's go ahead and get started with Public Works and the Midtown campus. Ms. Willer.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Is Finance going to share slides for this part of the budget hearing?
Yes, we will. Lawrence, if you can share the FY22 recommended budget for Public Works. Thank you.
I guess we're ready to go to the Midtown section, which I guess is, we've been using the table. So I'd make an introductory statement about Midtown and Public Works. So in fiscal year 20, actually, the city came into the responsibility of maintaining the Midtown property. And at that time, we worked with city leaders to establish an operating budget for the Midtown property so that we could maintain the infrastructure from declining. And make sure we actually had facilities that we could actually lease. So we do have a number of tenants at the campus, and the Midtown property has been really helpful in meeting a bunch of housing needs for both community groups, public services, as well as city staff and COVID response. When we created the operating budget to maintain the campus, we also created a position called the Midtown Property Maintenance Manager, or the Property Maintenance Manager, and Sam Burnett has been filling that position ever since. And in that role, he maintains the campus as well as participates deeply in the Midtown Redevelopment project. Public Works is totally committed to that project and supporting infrastructure planning, maintenance, improvements, leasing, however we can support it. And Sam has really been deeply involved with Rich Brown and Daniel Hernandez, who are leading that project. And so that's an overview. And then I will give the floor to Sam Burnett to say a little bit more about the FY22 budget.
Thank you. Mr. Burnett.
Mr. Chair, councilors, good afternoon. I'd like to just really quickly give you kind of an overview of day-to-day operations at Midtown and what that entails, so you kind of understand how these funds are used. Our day-to-day operations include facilities maintenance, master metered gas line management and compliance activities, grounds maintenance, capital improvement project management, utilities, lease and license agreement management, tenant management, security service management, and then, as Regina noted, project management and planning support for the Midtown redevelopment project. Most of the work that we do on campus is achieved through a series of on-call contracts we maintain with vendors in the HVAC, plumbing, electrical industry, general contractors, environmental remediation, gas line compliance support, landscaping crews, and then data and cabling services. And that's really kind of, day-to-day Midtown in a nutshell, and kind of the activities that we undertake. And there's not much more really to say about that. I think probably the best thing to do would be to turn it over to all of you to ask questions.
Okay, so let's do that. And if the questions could also include a little bit of discussion, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez and Villarreal, regarding the project manager position specifically. And because we left the community development motion, we said we would continue to discuss that, and hopefully land up with some kind of recommendation from this committee regarding that specific item. So Councilwoman Lindell, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask any specific questions, on the proposed budget, we're at just over 4 million on that. We're up a little bit over, or we're up almost $250,000. Does that budget include our debt service?
Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Lindell, yes, that includes debt service.
Okay. I sure had my fingers crossed that it did.
So what's the account number?
We good to go?
I think so. If everybody could just make sure you're muted until it's your time to speak.
Okay. Mr. Burnett, I'm going to call you Sam, okay?
Please do. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Does this budget, just in general terms, allow us to stop the deterioration of the property? Does it have enough money in it to allow you? Does it have enough staff? Does it have enough money in it to vacant properties deteriorate faster than occupied properties? We know that to be true. And that property has deteriorated rather dramatically in the last 3 years. I don't know, of this 4 million, how much of that is debt service?
Mr. Chair,
Thank you, Brad.
Sam, I'll take that. Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, the debt service is 1.67 million.
So the rest of this is operating monies for the campus?
That's correct.
Okay. So Sam, does that leave you enough money for the contracts and such that we need to keep that campus in one piece?
Mr. Chair.
Maybe an easier way for me to ask that to you, easier for you, is what are the areas that you have the greatest concern about in the deterioration of the campus?
Mr. Chair, Council Member Lindell, first, right off the bat, I'd like to be really clear that the intent, how we have been maintaining the campus, we have kind of two parallel strategies. We have certain assets or buildings on that campus that we've clearly identified as, permanent cultural assets, or, permanent assets to the city that I work to maintain at, a high, at top-notch quality, as we would with any other facility in the city. And for the most part, we've been very successful with that. There are many buildings on the campus that the future of those buildings are uncertain, that I maintain to a lesser degree than those buildings that will clearly be around or stick around. And even in those situations, while the maintenance is not perfect or at the level of a occupied building or a building that we think is permanent, we've still been very successful in maintaining them. There is, of course, as you note, some deterioration as a result of it being unoccupied, but with very few exceptions, we were very successful. I guess my greatest areas of concern are ensuring that those kind of institutional buildings, the Visual Arts Center, the Garson Theater, the Fogelson Library Complex, and Garson Studios are properly maintained to prevent any major damage, so that we're maintaining a long-term asset appropriately. And for the most part, we've been very successful with that.
Okay. What about the vast amount of, and maybe Chair, this is outside the scope of the budget, and if it is, we can bring it to a different committee or group, but that property has a vast amount of equipment on it, in many, many different locations. Do we have any plans or any thoughts or any conversations to have the state's biggest garage sale on that campus at some point in time, to take the burden off from you of trying to keep all of that stuff secure, and also maybe bringing in a small amount of money or maybe a big amount of money to the city? Because the amount of equipment and furniture and tools and camera equipment, and I mean, it's warehouses full of stuff.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Lindell, your timing is impeccable. Just this Wednesday, which I believe is yesterday, the Arts and Culture Department gave a presentation to the Midtown Steering Committee, kind of introducing them to the inventory they took of all the arts equipment, both art itself and the attendant equipment that you've mentioned, printing presses, cameras, and the like, and talked about their strategies for preserving that, both either to the benefit of the city or to the benefit to the community and local educational institutions. And that triggered one of the first real in-depth conversations we've had about how the FF&E, the furnitures, fixtures, equipment, and art are really one of the first issues we need to tackle as we really move full speed into the redevelopment process. There really are a couple different tiers of assets there. There's the art and the very, culturally or educationally relevant materials that the Arts and Culture Department are proposing we preserve for the benefit of the community. Then there's a kind of a second tier.
Mr. Burnett, is
yes,
this
sir.
something that you're going to present to Public Works or Finance or even Quality of Life?
I'm sure as we move into the Mr. Chair, as we move in to the redevelopment process and begin tackling this, it definitely will come to committee and council. So maybe it's now not the time.
Okay, Councilwoman Lindell, other questions?
I think that's all I have for right now, but Mr. Burnett, I appreciate the magnitude of the job that we've given you, because I've been on that campus numerous times with you. And I've also been on that campus when there's been some sizable problems. And you've done a really, really good job of maintaining what we have there. So I'm grateful to you. Thank you. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councilor Lindell, for highlighting that component of the campus. I did want to talk about the program manager position that I had brought up the other day, and my feeling that it more properly belongs in community engagement. And I want to be very clear that this is not a feeling that Public Works is not involved in the campus. We know very much that it is, and Sam, you've done an incredible job really working on maintaining the campus. But from my understanding of that position and the role that it's playing, and Rich Brown's role as the point person for Midtown, I feel that the most appropriate placement long-term for this position, and even in the short term, would be under community engagement. And Ms. Wheeler, I'd be, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And discussion of where Public Works might sit. But again, I've really heard so much about Mr. Burnett's success in addressing these pieces. And I know that there are other public work components that will come into play here, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from you.
Thank you so much for the question, Chairman, Councilor Cassett Sanchez. Yes, Sam and I have discussed this a bit and thought, quite a bit about it since we've been participating heavily in the Midtown redevelopment project. I would agree with you that while the exercise and the responsibility for the new position will be largely the zoning and public engagement and that first master planning process, that's really less squarely in the project, in the Public Works wheelhouse, and more maybe in community development. And then I feel like what I was kind of envisioning was that the project sits in ownership there in community development for this big phase that's, like 1 to 2 years of zoning and master planning. Then when it gets more into like implementing infrastructure projects and actually building horizontal and vertical infrastructure, then it might move to a project administrator in Public Works. And Sam has expressed a great desire to be very involved in those projects. And so that feels like a really good and natural process. And then perhaps that position that's been created in the community development department then takes on the next sort of master planning, public engagement, zoning, the bigger picture, or facilitating the, preparation for sale of a property, or, whatever those kind of community development projects might be. So it like I said yesterday, I do think that having project administrators at key positions throughout divisions and departments in the city is extremely valuable, because they can really keep their eyes on the ball and keep projects moving forward that sit in the different departments at different times. So those would be my thoughts.
Okay, thank you so much, Director Wheeler. And it was very much in line with some of the discussion that we had with Rich as well of the long-term goals of this position, not just for Midtown, but beyond. So I don't believe I have any other questions. I think I talked about it pretty thoroughly the other day with community development, but that is my plan. And when I make the motion, I will make the motion to move that program manager over to community development and out of Public Works. So thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions? I see a hand up, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Sam, for the work you're doing on the campus. And I think our concern was not that you're not doing what needs to be done, is that you need support, because you do get pulled into all these other project related needs at the parks, et cetera. So I think that was what we were thinking, not just project management, but support for any kind of community events that may occur there, whether they're part of the community engagement process or separate. So I think that was one of the things that I wanted to make sure there was support. And then also just as we start moving forward, how you can still be involved with Midtown, because your intimate knowledge is important. And then also have somebody to kind of back you up on some things that may not, that you may not be able to get to. So I guess I'm in agreement with my colleague about how to move forward and move that position so that it does fall with community development. what was the other question I had? I think that's all for this portion for Midtown specific. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question about that position, and that position will be the one who will be bringing the zoning, presenting whatever's needed in order to get the zoning changes. Am I correct in that?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, that is correct. That is the intention of that position. It would essentially become the project manager, kind of managing the, the full breadth of kind of the land use and planning and potentially beyond for the redevelopment process.
And I kind of remember that maybe we talked about this, but refresh my memory again about there was concern that and maybe this position was placed in Public Works to create some distance so that it doesn't, we are representing ourselves in our own process, and any potential conflict that might create. Remind me the thinking there. And
I can answer that, Sam. Chairman, Councilor Romero Worth. Yes, my understanding is that the land use division department cannot bring forth the zoning changes. And I think that's why Director Brown is putting the position reporting directly to him in community development and not in land use. And that provides, is in his perspective, enough separation from it being a land use self-submitted sort of change. So that's my understanding of that. And that was one of the thoughts about why to put it in Public Works. And so I don't really know if there's a legal ability to make a final determination of the appropriate separation there, but that's my understanding.
okay, and so then the thinking is it doesn't have to be in a completely separate department. It can be essentially in a separate section of the department, and that'll be okay.
And maybe City Manager LaPan Hill has a comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor Romero Worth. What Regina said is my understanding as well. There's not a technical or true conflict. It's really more about transparency and making sure things flow. So from a legal perspective, it is not my understanding there's a actual conflict. It's for ease of reporting flows and understanding sort of which the right hand from the left hand.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then I don't see any other hands up.
Mr. Chairman, could I add something here? We didn't talk about the rail yard. And I think since we have Mr. Burnett here, this would be a decent moment just to mention that the rail yard budget is included in the Public Works Administration budget that we already went through rather quickly. We have relatively small expenditures there, except our debt service, but a relatively large role to play in the success of the rail yard. And since our project administrator for the rail yard for the last 20 years retired last year, Sam Burnett has been filling that role as well and playing a dual role of supporting infrastructure maintenance and development at rail yard as well as Midtown. And I think that is going really well. And you'll be receiving our project, our department goals, objectives, and process on our goals and objectives or progress. And you'll find, I think that we're doing some great work in revitalizing the rail yard. We do have some capital needs there that will need to be attended to, but as we said yesterday, capital needs will be discussed in a separate process.
Okay, thank you. Okay, a hand went up. Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, Director Wheeler, is that dual role going to be sustained throughout this year?
Chairman, Councilor Cassette Sanchez, it is our desire to combine those two roles. Sam has volunteered to take care of them. He's doing a really good job of that. And so we're going to sort of officially modify his job description and position to combine them.
Okay, thank you. As my colleague, Councilwoman Villarreal, is always so wonderful at reminding us about, one of the areas that I've also been concerned about is these combining of roles. And so, I think it's the balance of finding other opportunities for growth, but also making sure that we are not overtaxing our staff. So please keep us updated. And, it's something that I definitely do want to hear. I know that sometimes people are afraid to say, that's too much, but I think it's really important information for us to have, especially as we are deciding how many positions to fund and where that funding needs to be placed. So if you guys could keep us updated on how that is moving along this year, and if there is a point, then it becomes, if you do change your mind for next year's budget hearing, I really hope that you'll feel comfortable enough to come forward and let us know that. So thank you.
Thank you. Will do.
Okay, so now next on the list is the Municipal Recreation Complex.
Thank you so much, Chairman. We the MRC and Parks was reorganized into Public Works in fiscal year 21 budget. And we have combined those into one division, MRC and Parks now. And Melissa Mcdonald was generous enough to step into the acting division director role over both of these divisions. The MRC is a complex operation in and of itself, including the golf course and Soccer Valley. And, as we have had this division in the department for less than a year, we're continuing to understand it and map out a plan for improvements and support, while, of course, keeping it open with a high level of customer service. And so that is where we're at with it right now. And I'll let Melissa Mcdonald, acting division director, speak to the budget.
Thank you very much, Chairman Abeyta and councilors. I really appreciate the opportunity today to talk about the budget. I would like to take a moment I am viewing this as together, Parks and MRC. I would like to take a moment to talk about our mission. Our mission in Parks is to create safe, clean, and enjoyable outdoor spaces. And I think our Parks crews do a very, very good job with that. We have over 70 parks, 26 open spaces, 170 miles of trail, historic plaza, as Regina Wheeler said, the Marty Sanchez Golf Course, Soccer Valley, a variety of amenities. We have baseball, soccer, tennis, basketball, pickleball courts, disc golf, tot lots, skateboard parks, barbecue pits, all kinds of things. And did I mention dog parks? I think we have a lot of dog parks too. So each of these locations have a trash receptacle and often a recycling receptacle and a doggy station. So that takes up a lot of our time. We also maintain a large amount of irrigated turf within the city. And maintain those irrigation systems. We have some places very aging systems, so that takes a lot of kind of tweaking. So these crews are doing a lot of different things. We also are really excited to announce our Tree Smart Santa Fe campaign. Some of you have been sponsors on it. Thank you so much. And we're going to be having our Arbor Day kickoff on April 30th, Friday at 4 o'clock at Rancho del Sol. So I hope you all will be joining us. And we're going to be really COVID safe. So bring your mask and we're going to be outside and that'll be a great event. I do want to point to our fiscal year 22 budget. And as Director Wheeler said, this is essentially really trying to complete the organization process that we started back in September. And we're very excited that we were given or we're considering putting in a project administrator. I think this is going to be really, I agree with Director Wheeler, this is going to be very important as we move forward with this initiative to do some CIP improvements this year. That person is going to help oversee that installation and design and following the contracts. That person could also do some of the inventory that we need to really get up on. So really keeping track of our irrigation parts, where we need to be coming back with CIP improvements in the future, maintaining a lot of those lists. And I think a project administrator is a really great position, and I'm excited to see the city go in that direction of placing them in various divisions. Also, as Director Wheeler mentioned yesterday, we combined our 2 superintendent positions that when they left to now have a newly formed operations manager as well as an administrative manager. And this is very important to the success of this division because when the division split, a lot of the administrative staff went to recreation. And then we've also had just a lot of attrition and retirement and just normal things that organizations have. So we've got quite a few positions that we need to kind of fill out, and we're advertising those now. But those 2 positions are very exciting to me. We also have discussed next year filling the golf course manager position that Jen Romero vacated. I think that's very important as we look at leases and the day-to-day operations of the MRC. It's kind of on its own out away from town, and it's beautiful to be out there, but it's nice to have kind of a central person that can manage that. We're also doing a lot of seasonal advertising right now for the MRC, and we are looking at doing that for the Parks Division. I know a lot of people have been wondering about the POLs. Currently, we have 55 full-time employees. We're advertising for 11 positions now, and that's in addition to the 6 seasonal temps that we're looking at for the MRC. I don't want to spend too much more time because I know you're in a hurry, but this new budget's going to be looking at increasing funding for litter pickup, illegal dumping and encampment cleanup. We're also going to be putting out more porta potties in locations and parks where people have requested them. We're also looking at increasing safety training. I know there's a big emphasis on that, and this is something that the crews are really welcoming. We also are going to be doing irrigation assessments. We're going to be doing data collection on our tree inventory type stuff. We're going to be doing planting, replacement of irrigation, things like that. We're going to be going back to our nonprofit trail maintenance folks and getting those people under contract to continue the great work that they're doing. And then we're also going to be freshening up the various parks with new equipment, which is super exciting because I think as people come out of the COVID situation, they really want to get out into the parks. We saw a tremendous amount of trail usage during COVID. We also saw a lot of people dining in the parks and the associated trash of, putting the pizza box in the bin and it not fitting, things like that. So we're anticipating that in this budget, and we're super excited to be helping people get out and enjoy things more as we transition. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Okay, yeah, and let's ask questions regarding both the MRC and parks since we have Ms. McDonald.
Mhm.
Thank you. Let's start with Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. McDonald, I want to thank you. I've worked with you and met you out at numerous different places, and I know the workload has been overwhelming, and you answer promptly, and you've just done a terrific job. Thank you very much. I am concerned of how we're going to go about getting the hires that we need. That I've sat on the oversight board for the golf course for a lot of years, and really, really concerned that we need, that golf course takes people, temps, to keep it going in the summer. And I know that we're trying to hire. How are we doing with that? And, do we have a plan B of how to get the hires that we need?
Thank you, Chairman Beta and Councilor Lindell. Well, we're advertising for the second time for the seasonals at the MRC. We are having a little difficulty filling those positions. They're closing on this coming Friday. So if anyone is interested in applying, they should. But our backup plan for this is to take those non-union positions and potentially do a temporary state pricing agreement staffing service. So what we would do is do a bar from our salary to cover those positions. And so again, that's our backup plan.
Is that something that you think could happen rather quickly?
Chairman Abeyta, Councilor Lindell, I think so. We have the finance folks on the phone, but finance has been working really well with us in terms of being able to bar things quickly during these challenging times. So I believe that we could.
Okay. If you could keep us updated on that, I'd really appreciate it, because I mean, we're at a really crucial time, particularly with the MRC right now. We're still, the golf course is operating under cart path only. We're not allowing people to drive on the fairways with a cart. We're trying to be as careful of that turf as we possibly can until we are sure we can properly maintain it. So thank you very much. And again, thanks for the great job. The crews were out. I saw them redecking a bridge over by Fort Marcy. They were doing a terrific job. We waited, I think, 2 years to get that done on a different bridge over across from Gonzales Elementary School. My hat is off to you for how quickly that happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else, Councilwoman Lindell?
That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do want to echo Councilor Lindell's comments about Melissa Mcdonald. You've been wonderful to work with, and just really appreciate how quickly you've stepped into this role and all you've taken on. And I know that you have a lot. And again, another one of our staff members that I'm sure Councilwoman Villarreal will mention as well, that we are very concerned and want to make sure that you are getting all the support that you need. So I heard, so we have 11 positions that you're hiring, and I think I heard 4 new positions this year. Is that correct?
Chairman Abeyta and Councilor Cassette Sanchez, we actually are only creating one new position, which is the project manager position, and we're unfreezing another position, which is the admin assistant. All the other positions are fully funded and are kind of reorged positions. And then we also have some vacancies from attrition, retirement, health reasons, various things.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that clarity. And then I did want to hear, we saw in the budget book, the $1 million that's going into upgrading our parks. And I would love to hear more about what our plans are. I keep seeing the word tot lot and it sounds very exciting. So please tell me more about tot lots and what that $1 million will be used for.
Chairman Abeyta, Councilor Cassette Sanchez, I too am very excited about the playground equipment improvements. We are allocating $300,000 toward what we're calling freshening up our parks. So essentially we're going to parks and we're bringing in new equipment, new things for people to, a lot of these parks have older equipment or, kids get tired of playing on them. So we're coming in and bringing in newer equipment and placing them in those same parts to kind of supplement and add to. And this is an approach that a lot of municipalities do in order to keep things fresh and fun. And I think that, as the kids get out into the parks more, this is a great opportunity. And I'm looking forward to working with you on that because I know that you have a lot of interest in especially the smaller age playground. So yeah, it's going to be super exciting.
Wonderful. Well, I do look forward to it. I have an expert in the house who can help inform. I'm also curious, we have talked about the Miracle Parks or ADA parks, ADA equipment. Is that something that we are also looking at this time?
Chairman Abeta and Councilor Cassette Sanchez, that is something that we could look at for sure. I haven't detailed out specifically what equipment we're purchasing, but absolutely we should consider that.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think that'd be great just for us, making sure that we have accessibility and things to play with for all the children in our community, regardless of ability. And that's something that I'm very passionate about. So I would love to continue that conversation. And then I know that we, in that list was also discussion of resurfacing of courts, of pickleball courts, of tennis courts. How many courts in the city do we have, and how many are planned to be resurfaced?
We have 20 tennis courts in the city. The resurfacing, we're really focusing on the most challenging ones. We're looking at Lara Goite and Herb Martinez for tennis. And for the pickleball, we're looking at Fort Marcy. The pickleball isn't so much about the courts being in bad shape. That one is a little bit more oriented toward creating a complex or an area in which you can come and get pickleball indoor and outdoor. And right now, Fort Marcy is a good space for that. So we're looking at that area.
Okay, wonderful. And then how?
I'm sorry to interrupt. If I could add it, just to clarify, these improvements that we're talking about right now are part of the capital allocation that actually hasn't been approved yet. So we have met about it. And I wanted to also add more about the capital allocation for parks is that we got $1 million from the state legislature this year. And I think we've discussed that the importance of and how much our courts need to be resurfaced, that we should probably consider resurfacing all of our tennis courts using that $1 million.
Thank you. And thank you for the correction. I will wait until we are discussing the capital budget to make sure that we are really staying focused on the operating budget. So thank you so much, Director Wheeler, for jumping in and making that correction. I think let me just check my notes real fast. All right, those are all my questions. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Melissa. Always a pleasure to work with you in whatever department you're in. And I really appreciate the Parks team. They're responsive and work really hard and usually don't get recognized for that. So thank you to the team. I was trying to figure out, so we're going to continue having you play dual roles. Is that right? Parks and MRC. And was there a thought to then have what, the original position that Jennifer held, which was overseeing all of MRC, including the golf course? Is that right?
If I could, Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, thank you so much for the question. Melissa has been acting in this role now since September, and we had to create the structure to support her in this role, as you and Councilor Cassette Sanchez have highlighted as so important many times. And we are very close to having achieved that support structure that would make Melissa comfortable and able to fulfill the position. And so our expectation and plan is actually to create a division that includes parks, MRC, and stormwater. You're hearing it here first. And that would be a division in and of itself. And inside that division, the support structure would include the position at the golf course, that manager. We're considering possibly making that a part-time job. It may be if it's just focused on that particular facility. And then there would also be the stormwater manager position that actually Melissa's sitting in right now. And when she vacates that for the division director position, then we could fill that to create more support structure, as well as the admin manager and the operations manager and the project administrator. So then we'll have a full-size team that can really get this job done. So that's our organizational plan.
And when will that plan be? Well, I guess how will we be vetting that? Or when will you be launching that? Or what's the plan for that combination?
Yes, thank you for the question. We've only, we're still, like I said, putting the last pieces in place to make it a manageable job before Melissa steps into it fully. And but I think we're very close. So I think over the next month, as we also have sort of a capacity issue in the whole city right now, that while we're all doing budget, it's really difficult to do anything else. And so I was thinking like right after budget is when we would start processing those changes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm curious to see how that would be structured more. They're definitely connected, and there's also some outliers within that for stormwater management. So just want to learn more about that when you all start moving forward with that potential. Did you say new division?
That's correct. It would, so as you see on this graph here, on this chart, so then MRC and parks would be combined and with stormwater in a division. So instead of an MRC division and a parks division separate.
Got it. Okay. And let's see, the other question I had was about trails. And I did read that we are reinstating the nonprofit trail maintenance. So that's awesome. And that's with the Santa Fe Conservation Trust, or is that with another nonprofit group?
Chairman Abeyta and Councilor, we are looking at reinstating the Santa Fe Conservation Trust, also the Fat Tire Society, and I Ride New Mexico. So we're adding I Ride and Fat Tire to the kind of palette of folks working on the trails.
Great. Okay, thanks. And then there was something else related to security camera coordination and placement. Where was that specifically going to happen?
Chairman Abeyta and councilors. Well, what we're really looking at, we have to come up with a series of them, but certainly Las Acequias and the rail yard are two very high priority ones for us. And then we need to come up with the others that we're looking at, the high risk areas.
Okay, and is that then tied into PD?
Yes, I would like to do that. We're still working with IT on that. They have a really great system that we're looking at. And basically, it doesn't directly go to IT, but we've gone through several iterations where we've looked at how it works. And I think it will be something that we can work with PD on. And that's very important in terms of whatever we do. IT is very interested in seeing this across the city and people being on the same camera system. So I think there's a little bit more work on that, but that would be the preference, I think.
And is that under your budget?
Chairman Abeyta, Councilor, well, pieces of it would be under my budget. So certainly the parks would be under my budget.
Okay. What was the total amount, Director Wheeler, for that? The security.
Pardon me, total amount for what?
For the security cameras.
And that was it. Was that in our operating allocation, or was it in our capital allocation, Melissa? I think it's about $175,000 in the capital allocation.
So that's capital. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. And in the budget, there was for MRC, there was a reduction amount, or it's like 38% lower. Can you explain that reduction?
Chairman Abeyta.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I can take that, or with Brad's help. That was actually caused by a pretty substantial reduction in debt service needs. It went down to about $100,000, and in previous years, or the previous year, it was more on the order of, let me see, it was, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing here. On the order of approximately $1 1.28 million. So I'll let Brad speak to the change in the debt service for the MRC on the 2016 C issue.
Mr. Chair, the reason why the debt service in 2016, the city refunded a number of bonds, and in which case they merged 2 bonds into one. The MRC was paired with, I believe it was wastewater, and the 2016 C bond refunded the 2 of them, and they had different maturities. And in the refunding, one bond lasted longer than the other. And so what you saw is the maturity of one of those issues that reduced the debt service for both MRC and wastewater.
Thank you both for that clarity. That was helpful to see the amount reduction. In the graph, it shows 996,000. So there was another portion, you said it was 1.28 and the rest of it gets made up where?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, that would be the primary factor is the net reduction in debt service to MRC. As Brad was saying, there would also be a reduction in wastewater debt service, but that was part of the same issue. But not they're paid in different places because one is for the MRC, one is for wastewater.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and just to drive home the point, because the decline you're looking at, the 996, is less than the reduction of the debt service, it was actually a small increase built in, but with the reduction of the debt service, it appears as if it's negative. But it's an actual growth in non-debt service expenses.
Okay. Thank you. Director Wheeler, there was one question just overall about the transfers of other funds. I don't know if you'd be able to answer this, or actually finance. It was transfers to other funds went down. It was an 84% reduction. Can you just explain the numbers for that one?
Thank you for the question. I think I would ask Andy for his help with that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that one's for me. And that was the same reason as I gave yesterday for tourism. And I can, let me find my email again.
That was from the convention center?
Well, it has to do with, at one time we thought we were going to use an enterprise debt service fund. And the money would have to be transferred out of the various enterprise funds, transit, or rail yard, MRC, or rail yard, Midtown campus, and the convention center. It would be transferred out of those funds and into the enterprise debt service fund. We decided to pay the debt service directly out of the enterprise funds, rail yard, Midtown, and not use the enterprise debt service fund. So we eliminated the transfers and just paid the direct debt service directly. That's why you see the large reduction in transfers out.
And what was that fund called that you created instead of the?
That was Fund 560, Enterprise Debt Service Fund.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarity. I think just checking with Director Mcdonald about the hires. Part of them are seasonal. And you said the delay was people applying, or is it the hiring process ends up taking longer and then we lose folks? What I don't quite understand the situation that delayed.
Chairman Abeyta, Councilor Villarreal, I was directly referring to the seasonals, and I'm not exactly sure why we're having such a hard time filling those positions, other than to say that, it could be pandemic related. It's just been difficult to fill seasonals, and apparently that's been a problem across the city. So we're certainly advertising. We've now released the announcement twice. We put out email blasts to our golf course patrons. We've, gone and called back people and asked them to reapply. So I'm not exactly sure what is keeping people from applying, but it's really more the fact that people just aren't applying.
So did you say your backup plan was to go through the state pricing agreement for contract services?
Chairman Abeyta, Councilor Villarreal, that's correct. There is a state pricing agreement that we could call upon if needed.
Got it. And that's separate from the 11 positions that my colleague referenced, the 11 positions you're hiring for now, this year?
Councilor Villarreal, that's correct. These are in addition to the 11 positions that we're currently advertising.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to my colleagues for these questions. That most of my questions are answered, but I don't think we talked about capital purchases and why that line item has decreased.
Chairman Abeyta, Councilor Romero Worth, is that in the parks budget?
Oh, well, maybe it's not.
Or can you refer to the Councilor?
You know what? It's not. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, I can briefly describe our process. From one year to the next, maybe I should start out by providing more context.
Well, and if this isn't the appropriate time, maybe I should wait.
It is it's applicable for
Okay.
not just public works, but potentially for other departments we're going to be hearing. And we can go ahead and provide a write-up on this. Our capital budgeting process is a multi-year budgeting process because, as you know, capital projects often span multiple years. So with this process, what we will do is at the end of the fiscal year, as of June 30th, we will reconcile the amount spent on various different capital projects throughout all departments. Largely, those capital projects are within Public Works and Public Utilities Department. At that time, once that reconciliation is done, usually in July and August, what we'll do is we'll do a budget adjustment. We'll understand how much was spent on that particular project through June 30th and how much funding remains. So, for example, if there was a project that was $1 million, if only half of that, 500,000, had been spent through June 30th, we would then proceed to budget the excess 500,000 for the subsequent fiscal year. But we cannot do that until we do the reconciliation process at the end of the fiscal year. And so that work, Regina and her team and Shannon and his team, together with the finance team, begin that work after the close of the fiscal year. And then through the months of July and August, we determine how much needs to be budgeted for the fiscal year 22. And again, what that does is it'll allow us to budget the appropriate dollar amount for the new fiscal year, and it will allow us to be able to finish the project or continue the project if it's a multi-year project.
Okay. One other thing, I also want to compliment Melissa for her hard work and how she stepped in to this new role, and it's been a pleasure to work with her. I also want to call out the Tree Smart Santa Fe program, public-private partnership, and the work that's being done on the city side to be part of that partnership, and the collaboration between and among various departments across city government to make the commitment to planting more trees and making sure that they're sustainable and that we plant them in the right place and provide shade as we face climate change this is going to become important, and this is an important investment that we need to start now because, as everyone knows, trees take a while to grow to the point where they provide the shade we are going to need. So I just want to give a shout out to the city's commitment, what this budget does to represent that commitment, and very grateful for the work that has gone on within city government and to partner with our community and private partners and funders. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councilwoman Lindell, I see your hand is up.
Sorry, Chair. Just one quick question for Director Wheeler. I'm hoping that you feel, and you can tell us yes or tell us no, it's your chance. Do we have enough money in this budget to take care of the medians? Because if we don't, we need to find some more money. I mean, it's, you don't have to be a hero about this. We need to be realistic about it because it's something that has been ongoing for some years. And I think that we all want to see that this year is a dramatic difference. And if there isn't enough money here, say so, and we're going to have to find some more money.
Thank you for the question, Chairman Councilor Lindell. You might recall recently the governing body approved additional allocation of operating funds to parks for fiscal year 21. And those funds, part of those funds are planned to be used for median maintenance, and which would be accomplished via overtime as well as supplemental vegetative services, professional services via contract. You should all probably know that there is a bit of a delay in our ability to deploy those funds through by supplementing our capacity with a contract due to the settlement of a recent issue with the union. So we're going to be 30 days delayed from implementation, which we would have started sooner. But I think we feel confident that with that funding at this critical time in the season to address the weeds, that we will be successful. And I think I'd like to ask Melissa if she'd like to comment upon the year to come and the funding level.
Chairman Abate, Councilor Lindell, I am fairly confident that we can achieve this, especially if we start to fill out some of the positions, not the seasonal positions, but the maintenance foreman position and or senior worker positions and some of the other areas. It's a little bit of a challenge, but I think we're going to make it. I've been talking every day with our crew saying, does this make sense? Are we going to do it? And they all are pretty confident that we will be able to do it. We will be probably putting in more overtime to, stay on top of it. Because really when the weeds grow is when you have to get to it. So, but I do believe that we're probably going to be fine.
And I'd like to add one more thing to that, if I could, Chairman and Councilor. And, as Mary, Director McCoy has said a number of times and has been demonstrated time and time again, as critical needs arise by divisions to deliver the services needed to the community, the finance team and city manager are always available to help us find additional resources. So we'll be sure to bring those needs forward to get their assistance, if that should occur.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, other questions from members of the governing body that aren't on Finance Committee regarding the Parks Division budget or the MRC? Okay, so that brings us then to the Parking Division.
Good afternoon, Chairman Abeta and councilors. I want to thank you first and foremost for this opportunity to speak before you. My budget is very small, so I don't think I would need too much time, but I want to start with, I want to commend all of the parking staff for working diligently throughout this pandemic year and to date, doing a lot of maintenance work that is very difficult to do in facilities when there are cars coming in and out, people walking, what have you. So they were able to accomplish a lot of things to upgrade and bring the facilities to a level that we are comfortable with. As an example, just one example, rail yard garage, every level, there are 3 levels, they're all underground. They have been color coded. Each level has its own color code with specific section signs that makes it very easy for the public to find their cars and to remember what level they were parked on and so forth. So that's just an example. They were also involved in setting up food pickup zones in front of restaurants upon request from the owners. And that was a big undertaking for them as well. And also we did the cashiering in the rail yard administration office twice a week for the benefit of the public last year. And as of last week, Monday, we have now started the operation where we are 5 days in the office offering cashiering services for people who want to appeal their citations or pay them and get permits, loading zones, etc. So I really wanted to, show my appreciation to the staff who never complained, and they were here every day throughout the whole last year and to date. So I think they need a huge applause for that. As for our budget, last year we were able to reduce our expenditures by over $1 million. And through automation of our garages, we were able to install during the pandemic a revenue control system in all 3 garages and complete the project on time and under budget. And so that was a huge undertaking, and we did it. And then last but not least, I want to talk about is for this year, for 22 budget, we have also reduced it by about $500,000, as you can see on this chart that is up there facing us. And I think once we have 3 critical positions that need to be filled, we are in a good place to offer the services that we have been offering the public and our guests, the visitors, tourists. And I think the future looks promising. Our revenue collection has also started increasing. There is a lot of meter activity and garage activity as well as the economy is opening up. So the future looks very good. And at this point, Chairman Obeda and council members, I am open to your questions.
Thank you. Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Correa, for the presentation and also the team. Like you stated, a lot going on, and appreciate all the work they did, and also just some of the troubleshooting that you have helped with the new system. I know there were some kinks, and you got that worked out. So I appreciate that. And just wanted to check, I don't know if finance can explain this for the parking division on the budget proposed. There's a reduction amount by 9%. Could you explain that?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, that is the same situation that Brad was talking about earlier with the transfer to the Enterprise Debt Service Fund that is no longer done. That is also as he was saying, you'll see that in several of the enterprise funds. That is the reason for the reduction in parking division as well as transit division, that the money no longer needs to be transferred to this Enterprise Debt Service Fund. So that transfer went away. And so that's part of the overall reduction in transfers that you see as well.
Got it. Okay, so that's solely debt service related.
Is that Chairman, Councilor Villarreal and Noel, maybe you can help me. We also had the designation of a number of positions as a result of the park system. Did that happen in this budget for the first time, or did it happen in fiscal year 21?
It happened in fiscal year 21.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. And I think that's all I have for parking. Thank you, Director Correa.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for parking? Okay, then we're gonna move on to transit.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I just would say, I think we're all familiar with the big operation at Transit. It's the biggest division by number of employees in Public Works. It has over 120 employees. And as I said in my opening remarks, has been completely delivering services throughout the pandemic, as well as additional emergency services. I would also like to highlight that we're involved in a multimodal transition planning process. And this is, transportation is, the best practices for transportation is modernizing quickly. There are things like on-demand services and micro transit loan products. And so we are engaged in a multimodal transition study that really looks at our transportation network, trails, parking, and buses. How does it work together? How does it serve the community's mobility? And Tomas has been, as the transit director, Tomas Martinez, has really been on the cutting edge of that and has actually already implemented this year some on-demand services for certain destinations, as well as continuing to provide a really excellent and important paratransit service that provides on-demand service, as well as supporting senior transportation. So with that, I'll let Director Martinez speak.
Good afternoon, Chair and council members. Yeah, we implemented 5 of our routes that were our lower riding routes to be on demand, and that seems to really be working real well. At first, we had a little pushback from the public, but once they figured out that they could call and get a ride where they needed, they got real comfortable with it. We've recently made a couple changes on a couple routes. We're having to adjust as we're slowly coming out of the pandemic and ridership is going up. Ridership has been climbing very well, so that's a positive. And as Regina said, we're working with this company to get a good study and see if we can serve the entire city a little bit better with the resources that we currently have and see what resources it would take to serve it even better.
I think it's worth mentioning as well that Transit has been the recipient of significant CARES Act funding to offset some of the costs during the pandemic. Maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Yes, we received $4.9 million the first go round of CARES Act money. And it looks like we're going to be somewhere in the 4 million range at least for the second round, but we haven't gotten a complete number from the feds yet.
And so I think those funds help to reduce the burden on the general fund for the operation. Is that correct? And that would cover approximately half of your annual budget?
Not quite half, about a third, close to a third.
Okay, thank you.
And also, as Andy mentioned before, most of that 3% reduction is just our debt service with them pulling the money direct instead of it going in and then coming out.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Tomas. I have a question. You had mentioned that you had changed one of the routes to on demand instead. And I do find transit very interesting and figuring out, how is our transit system serving our community? And you mentioned the multimodal study. And I'm very curious about if we have funding now, if we're going to need funding in the future, to be looking at where transit is in our city and where it needs to be and how we make those adjustments. so I know it's a little bit of a broader question, but I'm curious to get some feedback on that from you guys.
Well, thank you for the question. That's what this multimodal study is actually looking into, to see what we can do with the funds that we currently have, how we could readjust some of the routes to serve different areas better. And it's also looking at the possibility of possibly running smaller vehicles. Some of the ideas we've looked at, we're looking at running, one of the things I do, we have a couple of runs that are on demand, but since the rail runner's running, we run 2 runs regular in the morning, and then midday we go on demand, and then in the afternoon we run regular runs. So we're looking at different ideas, things that we used to do in Albuquerque, that we're just kind of trying to see what we can do to make fit best, and working with the consultants. And we want to see what we can do with what we have. And then if the consultants come up with something where we'll need more funding to make it even better, we will be coming back to you guys.
Wonderful, thank you. And is the funding for the multimodal study, is that here or is that sitting in MPO?
Chairman, Councilor Cassett Sanchez, it was actually funded through the capital reallocation of the $6 million from the fire station.
Okay, so that'll be part of that capital budget too. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that you guys are looking into it, and thank you again for all the work that you've done. And I know it's been challenging during the pandemic to figure out how to address transit. And so thank you so much to you and your staff for all that hard work and for ensuring that our community still is able to get to where they need to go. And I know that it's definitely our transit staff and those that are interacting with the public, we cannot thank them enough for that incredibly important service. So thank you.
They are an awesome team. The one thing about transit, no day's ever the same.
That's right. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Martinez. I appreciate you and your humor. I was curious. So I understand the debt service reduction. There's 2 areas that were reduced that I'm trying to figure out which one was debt service transfer and which one was something else. One is just the overall transit budget shows a reduction of like 3.6%. And then the other one was the transit bus system fund reduction. So could you tell me the difference between, or what the fund is about?
That would have to be Brad or Andy, because they know the deep part of the numbers. They just hold me down and take it.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, those are basically two ways of looking at the same issue. The reduction is in transit and transfers out, and in the transit operating fund. The ins and outs of, any particular fund versus the particular, overall division may be slightly different because, there are multiple funding sources going into the division, but the primary driver of that reduction is the same for both.
Okay. Thank you. So that's not any reduction of operations related funding?
None at all.
Okay. And thank you for that. And then Director Martinez, what was how is your staffing now? Are you fully staffed?
No, ma'am. We are having the same problem that Parks is having. It's a countrywide pandemic. If you watch the news, every single place is reporting the same problem. There's even restaurants that are saying that they can't even open all the ways that they can because they just can't get any staff.
So when you say you're advertising, you're not getting folks applying?
Yeah, we'll run our last one. We just closed out a week and a half ago, and we had it running for 2 weeks. We have radio ads, we have banners out, and we have 2 applicants that applied. And then the last round, we had 5 people apply, but when you call them to come and interview, they decline the interviews.
Chairman, and Councilor Villarreal, if I could, it's a very competitive market out there for CDLs right now, and the city's not really competitive for that particular licensure, I think, and transit just struggles with turnover because people come to transit. Transit has a really effective and efficient training program where they can get people from entry level to CDL driver within less than a year. And then those people take that license and go get, more money and more benefits someplace else. So it's really, I know that HR worked really closely with transit in the last couple of years to do some retention pay. But I think we're still dealing with competitiveness for the CDL licensure. Tomas, maybe you could add to that if you could.
Yes, you're absolutely correct there. We have park and ride, and we have RTD, and we also have the schools, and all of us kind of fight for the same people. CDLs, that's not an easy thing to have and maintain these days. So it's a limited supply of people that have them. So we're constantly, like Regina said, we have a good training program. So we try to bring people in and train them. But a lot of times our rates just aren't competitive enough to keep them.
So have we thought about increasing the rate to be competitive?
We did increase it once. That's something that we have talked about, and that probably will be coming back around soon.
What do you mean by that?
This year's been a really rough year. It's been the worst that we've had. So it's something that we may have to really start looking at. We're down really low on staffing levels.
And so with this budget, is that taking into account potentially looking at rate increases? No.
It isn't directly, but I feel I could talk with Mary and come up with a way to do it if we had to.
I saw Director Wheeler shake her head. So what does that mean? No?
Yeah, that definitely means that raises to increase the pay for these positions is not included in this budget. And I think it's complex, and I'm not sure if Director Salazar is here, but it's obviously complex. It's a union issue. There are CDL drivers across the city that make different things for different roles. And so, you know how it is if you're looking at compensation for union positions in the city of Santa Fe, it's a complex issue. And I think, given the number of drivers that Tomas has, it's also a significant financial consideration. So that there has been nothing added to this budget beyond what might happen as a result of, say, union negotiations and the raise that was, I think, announced for non-union and positions already.
So when you say you aren't fully staffed, how many positions are vacant right now?
I'm currently 11 positions down.
Have you thought about combining, I don't know how this works really, but for HR, but combining salaries, so maybe there's not 11 positions, but less positions at a higher pay?
That's something that we may talk about. We've talked about several different ways to approach it. It's like Regina said, it's really complex. So that's something that we'll be talking to them once we get through the budget cycle. And it's we're not 100% sure that it's totally finances. Some of it's got to do with the pandemic. Some of it's got to do with people afraid to come back to work. And being a bus driver, you're an essential person that's around people all day long.
Right.
So there's a whole lot of factors involved in it.
Understandable. Well, I guess just keep us abreast on this. I just want to understand, because I wouldn't want reduction of services because of this. There's people that depend on us in this community to get to work. And as things start opening up and changing, we're probably going to have more service needs. So,
yep.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Other questions for transit? Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez, do you have a motion regarding the Public Works Department budget?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I move to approve the Public Works budget with the amendment that the Midtown project manager is moved from the Public Works budget to the Community Development budget.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. McCoy, are you clear on the motion and the amendment?
Can you please restate it for the record?
Yes, I move to approve the Public Works budget with the amendment that the Midtown project manager is removed from the Public Works budget and added to the Community Development budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Counselor.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Counselor Beta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the HR department budget. But before we go there, I was notified that Comcast service may go out on the south side around 3 o'clock where I am and the service I happen to have. So if that happens, I would ask that the finance committee continues and Councilwoman Romero Worth chair the rest of the afternoon if in case that does happen. So if I disappear, that's why, but keep going. Okay, so let's go to Human Resources, Director Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. I'd like to take this opportunity to provide some information regarding the FY22 budget. We're very thankful that the recommended budget provides great support for our employees. I think the common theme that I've heard throughout the budget presentations is that it's been a really tough year for everyone, and we're excited to be able to implement such great initiatives. So I'd like to start out by thanking my small but mighty HR team for doing such an amazing job during this very challenging time, learning lots of new topics in a short period of time, having the ability to be agile and work on issues that were new to everyone in the whole world, basically. And I would also like to say that our employees and all of our supervisors have been amazing partners throughout this process, because it's been very challenging just trying to get through the pandemic. Some of the accomplishments that I'd like to highlight for FY21 is, of course, our COVID response. We were able to develop and implement our COVID policies and guidance for employees if we have positive cases of COVID. We implemented within the existing HR team a 24/7 COVID response team that helped employees through all the questions that they had if they were exposed to the virus or they were actually positive for the virus, and worked with them on their leave in compliance with the federal act that was in place at the time. We implemented the daily screening questionnaires and did lots of work in reshaping what the work environments look like to have the most safe work environments for our employees as possible. And we provided lots of training for employees when the policy came out and how they navigate through if they were unsure about something or if they were close contact to the virus or actually had the virus. So that's one topic. And then the second topic, even though this was a challenging time, the HR team really did an amazing job with training and development of employees and pivoted towards online training. So they, of course, did the HR training related to the COVID processes that I just explained, but they also implemented the local GovU training platform, which allowed our city employees to take advantage of training sessions. And from January 25th through April 13th, we've had 253 employees complete training, which is equivalent to 1,265 hours. in that short period of time. So we're excited to continue with that training platform, and we're really excited to allow this opportunity for our employees. The other highlighted benefit is we implemented several wellness programs for our employees and their families to deal with all the challenges of the pandemic, to include physical and mental health wellness for our employees and their families. Lastly, I'd like to just point out that although it's been a challenging year and we've been really busy kind of navigating through COVID response, we have also worked very closely with several departments, trying to help them with their operational needs of the department, which includes working with them on implementing career ladders and job description changes, and in some cases, salary increases for difficult to fill positions. Some of the examples of career ladders that we've been working on and hope to get implemented soon are for street maintenance. We've been working with project management, facilities maintenance that I believe Regina talked about yesterday. We've worked with records technicians, the libraries, and our legal department. We have also done a significant number of job description changes to make the job descriptions more in line with what employees are actually doing. And that includes positions in parks, public works, traffic signals, engineering, land use, recreation, fire, finance, legal, libraries, etc. And lastly, we did work very closely with the Public Utilities Environmental Services Department to increase the compensation for equipment operators in compliance with the collective bargaining agreement. Some of our goals for the upcoming fiscal year is to continue to add more training opportunities for our employees, to continue to work on COVID response and adapt to any changes recommended by either our state, Department of Health, or the CDC, and then complete a classification and compensation study, and then to provide departments with time to fill reports so they can track their recruitment processes as well. So those are some high level goals that we have for FY22. So right now, I'd like to pivot to our insurance benefits. As we're all aware, the city's insurance benefits are highly valued and very important to all of us and our employees. So right now, I'll turn it over to Todd from Aon, who will talk about the FY22 renewal.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Should I share my screen, Bernadette, or is it part of this presentation?
It is not part of this presentation. I don't know if we can give Todd the sharing capability.
Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Just let me give some background on how we calculated the estimated increase for the next fiscal year. We used claims through December of 2020 and adjusted those claims for enrollment changes and tried to make an adjustment to account for the impact of COVID on claims. As I think everyone is aware, particularly in the second quarter of calendar year 2020, claims were suppressed due to COVID. So what we've done is adjust those claims upward to try to eliminate any impact of COVID on the claims for that time period. The result is a projection that calls for an 11.1% or $2.3 million increase to the expected healthcare costs in the next fiscal year. Here I want to give an overview of roughly the last 10 years of results and enrollment for the city of Santa Fe. And the top chart, the bar section of the chart, is the cost divided by the premium. So if that number is above 100%, that means costs exceeded premiums. If it's below 100%, premiums exceeded costs. As you can see from FY18 forward, there has been a deficit when you compare premiums received versus costs outlaid, and it ranging from 101% to 107%. Next thing I'd like to point out is for years, the city's enrollment on the medical plan ranged between 1,200 and 1,250 employees. You can see it was that way from FY13 all the way through FY19. Due to the pandemic and the hiring freeze, we've seen a substantial drop in the number of enrollees on the health plan from 1,203 in FY19 to an estimated 1,126 in the current fiscal year. That's a drop of about 100 employees from the average over the prior 8 years. The bottom section, if you can see, what I want to show here is that really what the city's approach to constantly rising healthcare costs has really been to take very little action for several years and then have one large increase every 3 or 4 years. So you can see in that top row, going all the way back to fiscal year 11, there was no change in 11 or 12 to premiums, and there were changes for the next 4 years. Then 3 years of no increases to premium, then a 10% increase. And for this current fiscal year, as you recall, it was recommended about an 8% increase, and that was determined because of the pandemic, which was a rational decision at the time, I think, to take that money out of reserves rather than impact the employees with higher premiums. That second row, what we're showing is that the city has made minimal benefit changes over the past 10 years. You can see about every 3 years, there's about a 2% reduction in benefits. So what that is, in fiscal year 13, 16, and 21, the city has increased copays and other member cost share to offset some of the increases. And that last row of this chart shows nationally, which pretty much mirrors local trends as well, what medical cost trends have been over the last 10 years, which are roughly 5% per year. So this chart shows the estimated fiscal year 21 year-end results in column A. In row 2, well, row 1, we're estimating an average of 1,126 employees. Again, that's down about 100 from the average over the last 10 years. Estimated expense, that includes both claims and administrative costs, is a little over $20 million. The cost sharing is 23.5% for the employee and the remainder to the city. So we've got total revenues in row 7 of 18.9 million, costs of a little over 20 million, or an estimated shortfall of about 1.1 million. We discussed 2 different options on what to do with the estimated 11.1% increase in fiscal year 22. Column C is what the city has recommended, and that is not increasing the employees' premiums, those biweekly premiums from the city or the employees, and funding the expected shortfall out of reserves. In row 8, column C, you can see that expected shortfall is 2.26 million. And the other thing that we've done is we've assumed an average enrollment next year of 1,225 employees. Again, that as these positions that have been on hold are refilled, we expect enrollment to get back to where it was prior to the beginning of the pandemic, to more of an average of what it's been over the 8 or so years prior to that. And lastly, this is just the backup data that flows into, I think everyone has seen this before, that just flows into that 22.8 million expected cost. And the last item I want to mention is that the The health fund has been depleted over the last few years, and we were tasked with coming up with a way in the future, once the pandemic is over and healthcare costs have stabilized. What do we do to help replenish the health fund? I think, as you're aware, there have been suggested increases the last few years, and those have been basically offset by reductions from the health fund. So what this proposal says is that if there's a deficit halfway through the fiscal year, is that we will, in addition to the calculated increase, and if, for instance, this year, in addition to the 11%, if there was between an $800,000 and $1.2 million shortfall, then we would really request an additional 2%, or based on current enrollment and costs, about $380,000 to help replenish that health fund. That's not the entire shortfall. As you can see, the $800,000, it's about half of that. And the rationale behind that is when there is a shortfall, it's typically because of a larger number than expected of high cost claimants. And what we don't want to do is overshoot it and penalize both the city and the employees with an addition that's larger than necessary. And that shortfall can be achieved, one of two ways, really. We can either reduce benefits or increase premiums, or some combination of both. So that's all I have. I will open it up to questions.
Okay, Director Salazar, we'll have questions for both you and regarding your budget and health. Is there anything else you want to conclude with, or are you ready for questions?
Mr. Chairman, I think we can jump into questions in the spirit of time. We can go ahead and do that.
Okay, so questions from the committee. Councilwoman Villarreal. And you're on mute.
I thought I clicked it, sorry. I have a number of questions, so let's see if I could get through them efficiently. So I can't see, all right. So I think, as you all know, that I'm always concerned about and interested in our training. And I'm glad that that's still continuing, and we have more funding for training and also tuition assistance. And I was wondering if somebody could answer what types of training we're offering, and also what's mandatory for staff.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal. So with Local GovU, there's an array of trainings that we can provide to our employees. So for right now, the trainings that most of them have completed is harassment prevention, bullying in the workplace, those types of trainings. Again, there's a large catalog of trainings that we can open up, and we are currently working with our HR team to work on those. There's also specific trainings for departments such as public utilities that are very specific to those jobs. So we'll continue, elaborating on that catalog and offering those training sessions to our employees. We are also partnering with the community college on a variety of trainings. You may have seen the email go out on the COVID workplace safety training. That's one that has already been implemented. We're going to do a lot of we've heard feedback from employees about Microsoft Office training. So we're going to offer those types of training, supervisory training, leadership training, training for employees who are not supervisors, but want to perhaps think about becoming a supervisor, and offering some sessions for those employees. Of course, this is all separate from the safety training that will go on, and I'm sure that that will be talked about later. We will also be working on implicit bias training, equity, those types. And again, those are also topics that are in the local GovU catalog. So it's just, there's a lot to offer. So we're really excited about that.
Who runs the local gov? Who puts in actual trainings? Is it just like a national organization that just does like more kind of general trainings, more kind of mainstream trainings?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, it is a national company, but they have a focus on local government because and I am happy to share the catalog with you so you can look at it, but there are some very specific training that are for local government. So I'd be happy to share that catalog with you.
So I guess I'm curious because I saw local gov pop up and I haven't enrolled in it because I just don't have time. So I haven't been able to look at the catalog, and I'd love to see what's offered, especially as it relates, because I care about this implicit bias, or as it's often now called, diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So that's been on my mind since I started on council, and we have not been able to figure that out, how to implement it. That in particular could not necessarily have a good frame from a national perspective. We have a very local context that I think people need to understand. And I know you and I talked about this before COVID hit, that there are plenty of local resources to be able to provide those kind of trainings. So I know that you're probably not, I don't know, maybe you all aren't thinking about local trainings now in person for this year. Is everything just going to be going through local gov?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, no, we want to have a host of different opportunities. So it will not just be primarily local gov. It'll be, the community college. It could be local trainers, a variety.
So I'd like to look into that more with you. I just feel like these local gov platforms, they don't really get to the crux of what we need to know from a local perspective and cultural perspective. And I guess in general, how has the local gov participation training been in terms of staff participation?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, so it's been open since the end of January, and we've had over 200 employees finish training sessions, and that equates to over 1,200 training hours. So we've had good response. We've also received really good feedback, whether it's positive or maybe comments from employees saying, this curriculum could, maybe that it should be reframed. We've actually taken those comments to the local gov representatives, and they've made changes. So it's been a really good opportunity for them too to adapt to comments that our city employees are making. So we really welcome those comments, but it's been very well received so far.
And I guess when I saw the notifications, I thought they were just, if you have time, these are trainings for you to consider. But I don't know if everyone, at least I couldn't tell from the emails, that they understood they were mandatory. How are you getting the word out that those are mandatory for certain departments and staff?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, there's definitely some trainings that we would like to make mandatory on an annual basis. We will definitely work with our unions to make sure that we're in agreement with all of that. But it's really those basic trainings that we need refreshers on annually, like harassment in the workplace, workplace violence, those types of things. So we're working with each department and divisions, and we will incorporate a policy, hopefully this coming fiscal year, that would outline what those requirements would look like.
Yeah, because 200 employees out of what do we have now? 1,200, 1,500 total?
About 14.
So that's not very much. So I think maybe there's a better way to strategize about letting people know about those training opportunities and which ones are offered for their own development and also which are mandatory. What about the trainings that are for incentivizing for certification and licensing? Are there any for that?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, specific to the departments, I believe that departmental budgets still will have those resources for their training. And so I think that they'll be able to still take advantage of that. If HR can assist in any way, we have talked, as I mentioned earlier, with several departments on job restructuring or a career ladder. We can definitely assist, like if we have a session for CDL certification and the city's paying for that training, we will definitely partner with the departments to get that implemented.
So who has to initiate it? Somebody, can a staff person initiate that that is interested in that? And what would be the process for them to know where the budget is to be able to do that?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, for AFSCME employees, their collective bargaining agreement spells that out. But certainly if any employee has questions on how to navigate that, they can either contact their department supervisor or definitely someone in HR, and we can guide them through that process.
So is any of that training, say it's not within the department specific, could they then look for training funds through your department?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, the way that the budget has been implemented, obviously this last year we didn't have a training budget, but the year before that, the funding for tuition assistance was for accredited courses and then citywide training that we would be offering to all city employees. Typically, if someone is requesting department specific training, it would go through their department. So I don't recall receiving any specific departmental request for training to come out of the HR budget. And it was pretty limited back then, so it was really geared towards the tuition assistance.
Okay. For tuition assistance, what was the budget before or in previous years, and what is it now? Since we just said that you added, what was it, 100,000?
Yes, I believe it was 40. I want to say 40,000, 40 or 50,000 in the past, and we're in this FY22, the requested amount is 100,000.
Okay, so past years, we've had only a budget of 40,000 and we're increasing it. We didn't have it last year and then we're increasing it this year to 100,000?
Yes,
okay.
I have received a lot of feedback from employees. I think our cap is 1,600, and some employees who take advantage of the tuition assistance have asked if we can increase that as well.
Because of tuition cost increases?
Yes.
Okay, and that's what you all will be doing that?
That would be a policy decision, and then of course it's a collective bargaining agreement issue if it's in a union contract.
So when you say policy decision, you're saying we would have to change that?
The tuition, I believe the tuition assistance policy is a city manager policy. So we could amend that to increase it.
So city manager, I can't see you, but you're somewhere there. Is that something that you're considering then? Because of tuition increases, how everything has just pretty much increased across the board?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I think it's certainly something to be discussed and considered. I think as Director Salazar has mentioned, I mean, part of what we need to see is what the uptick is. We're coming out of last year with nothing. And I'd like to, if I could, request that we, should this amount be approved and we get forward in the budget, that we revisit maybe after the first quarter see what our numbers are, and then we could amend as necessary.
Okay, that's good to know. I think that's important because I've heard that across the board that tuition's going up everywhere to compensate for less students. So less students on campus, I should say. And then class and comp, you know how I feel about the 2018 challenges, and especially what you all had to go through with that contract. And I would just want to make sure that if we utilize that money, that obviously we're using a different company, and also that we don't look at the same. I didn't really like the methodology that the last company used. I didn't think it was, I don't think their study was done very well. It was poorly done. I think it actually created some more inequities and pay scale differentials that maybe we didn't anticipate. So what are you seeing then for that particular study, and who we think we might be able to work with that will really start aligning things more clearly instead of creating these, I don't know, they're just these, I think they're just not anticipated changes that happened that then created these larger issues. So what are your thoughts on that? And who do you think we'd be working with, if you know, or?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, this would have to go through an RFP process. So we would go through that process and then of course select the best company in compliance with our procurement code. I do think that the class and comp process was challenging. I think it is definitely one step in the right direction due to the fact that the city had engaged in, several studies but never implemented anything. So I think this was the first step to getting us kind of in order and having a digestible compensation plan, classification and compensation plan. And then now the work that we could do with whoever the selected company is moving forward would be to really look at these issues that we've had as we've implemented this one. But I do think we have a really, really good process for identifying pay ranges. It's, it's very fair and equitable, and it's not based on the person, it's based on the position. So I think it's a good plan, but I do think that doing the updated study will help us get to the next level. And I think it's good timing because as we've heard, we're really seeing a lot of challenges with recruitment. And so a compensation, professional is gonna be able to help us through that and guide us and maybe give us some tips on how we manage that from a more national perspective, I guess you can say.
Right, that's good to hear. And we're not using the same company, correct?
I don't know if they'll bid, but yeah, we'll see.
I hope we don't let them apply. That's all I have to say. I just think that it made your job harder trying to work with those folks. And I'm just looking out for you all because it was just challenging trying to piece it together at the end and not getting, and still not getting, and actually this is something I want to add, the pay, the gender equity pay, we never got that, or at least I never saw it. So I definitely want that to be part of the study. Other cities have done it. I think we could figure it out too, if we get the right consultant. Let's see. I was looking at the budget and there were the contract line was talking about an increase of 42,000. Again, it's called contractuals and utilities. And I was just curious how many contracts that includes, or how many contracts you anticipate for this fiscal year that you would be utilizing in HR?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, bulk of that would definitely be the classification and compensation study. We also have, when we have arbitrations, those costs come out of that line item. It's an increase to our budget because the HR department is assuming responsibility for substance abuse programming. So drug and alcohol testing. There is a slight increase for the Cigna contract, the admin fees, and those are the types of contracts that are coming out of that.
Okay. And are you fully staffed in HR now? Or do you currently have vacancies?
Currently have 4 vacancies.
What are they right now? What positions are they?
We have a benefits position and the rest are HR positions.
HR positions? Just general?
HR analyst and HR administrator position titles.
Thank you. And then in the budget, there was a line called other operating costs. We always talk about this every year. I'm always confused about what that entails. And there was an increase. It says the 243% increase. I'm not sure why.
Yes. So this is the, yes, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, this is the 100,000 for tuition assistance, 50,000 for citywide training, and then additional funding for the local GovU training. And then this also includes services to other departments.
What was the GovU amount?
I believe it's 40,000.
And then for your salaries and wages, that went down as well, 15%?
Yes, so the retirement incentive was removed from salaries and wages. And then the vacancy rate was decreased. I think Director McCoy explained that earlier on. And then it does account for the across the board increases for HR employees. And then as mentioned earlier in the budget hearings, the AFSCME allocation for salary increases as well is in that line item.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then we talked about, I know you sent an email about the bilingual incentive pay, and I looked through the documents, but I didn't know what the rate was now for incentive pay.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, I will have to get that to you. I don't have the union contract right in front of me, but I can certainly email that to you.
Okay, and has that changed through the years, or it has stayed, the rate has stayed the same?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, I would have to see when the last time that was changed. I think it was the same with the last collective bargaining agreement, but I'm not sure when the last time it was changed, but I can research that.
In the collective bargaining, that's actually where that's adjusted through that process? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
And yeah, I guess I'm just curious what that is and how it compares to other cities. I'm just curious if that's shifted and changed and has actually gone up. So if you could send us that information, that would be great. And then last, for the collective bargaining reserve was 1.235. That was equivalent to the 4% increase. So is that this fiscal year? And if there was any requirements legally for makeup from last year's furloughs, that's a whole separate pot of money?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, the allocation in the 1.2 million that you're speaking of is for FY22. So it would be available after July if the budget is approved, and anything dealing with the furloughs is a separate topic.
Okay. And a separate budget line item?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, any settlement discussions with AFSCME that would not come out of the 1.2 million.
Okay. Director
And Mr. Chair, Councilor, just to clarify, the collective bargaining reserve, as I mentioned earlier this week, is located in 3 different locations. We're hearing from Director Salazar now, the 1.2 million collective bargaining reserve for AFSCME is located in the Human Resources Department budget, because that will then get allocated out according to the collective bargaining agreement that the City Council will approve in the future. Again, that is the equivalent to 4%, not just for a salary increase, but also for any salary dependent benefits, which would include para or other retiree healthcare type benefits. The other 2 collective bargaining reserves are located for POA, it's located in the police department budget, and for the fire department, for the fire union, it's located in the fire department budget.
Got it. Thanks for that clarity. I think that's it, surprisingly. Thank you for your time, and thanks for your work. And also just the responsiveness. I do appreciate how you all jumped into the COVID response and the team. I think that was, we didn't exactly know what that looked like. So I appreciate that you all figured out quickly what you needed to do for that and to support staff. And also just seeing the wellness programming. I wish I could have participated in all those. I know we don't get to compete, but I really wanted to. And so I appreciate all the information and ways that you were trying to engage the staff on that. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple of things. I think Councilor Villarreal had pretty extensive questions, so answered quite a few things. In the last few years since I've been elected, we've certainly placed some emphasis on safety training. Can you talk a little bit about that, what the opportunities are, and does that continue to be a priority?
Chairman, Councilor Romero Worth, I can talk briefly about it. Safety has now moved under emergency management as of the last budget cycle, but I know that they have offered plenty of trainings. I know COVID put a delay on a lot of them, but I have noticed, and of course, some of my staff have attended the OSHA 10 training that they're offering. So they are continuing with a significant amount of opportunities for our employees to engage in safety training.
Okay, sorry I didn't ask that when that budget was in front of us. I had forgotten that. Just want to emphasize the class and comp study. Really happy to see that we're doing that. So it'll take how long to complete? Is the idea it'll be done, and then is the idea to implement it for next fiscal year, or will there be preliminary recommendations that might be implemented at mid-year, or what, is there any advanced thinking about how that works? I mean, obviously really important, and that we continue to improve and actually implement, as you alluded to earlier.
Sure, Chairman, Councilor Romero Worth, that's a really good question. I think my vision with this is to engage in the RFP process and get the study done for recommendations for the next fiscal year. And then, of course, working with departments, you've heard a lot about the challenges that they're facing recruiting particular positions, but we won't stop that work in the meantime. So if we're really seeing a huge shortage with certified DOT certified drivers, then we need to work with the departments to come up with a different plan. So we will continue that work. We won't just hold it for the class and comp, but that's how I envision it, that any changes would be for the next fiscal year.
Okay, and so the idea would be that, how long does the RFP process take? A couple months?
I would say probably a couple of months, yes.
Yeah, so we might be underway in the study, I don't know, midsummer or something? Or you actually have to wait for the budget to be approved and then the start of the fiscal year, I would assume. So maybe the fall, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. All right, helpful. So I think you said a quarter of our employees have taken advantage of this new training that just became available in January. Is that right?
Yes, and actually, there are 818 employees who are actually in progress with the training. So we have really high participation. I think the 200 that I had mentioned earlier, I think completed, but we have that number who are actually in progress. So we're having a really good response on the local GovU. One other thing that I didn't mention earlier that I just thought of, and we have worked closely with the New Mexico EDGE program, which is very specific to state and local government training. And of course, things were on hold because of COVID, but we had started those training sessions for our employees right before that. And we will continue working with them to offer those opportunities for our employees.
And I assume also continue to remind people that these things are available. We all get busy in our day-to-day lives and then sometimes, forget that we wanted to partake in some of these professional development opportunities. I don't know if their lives are anything like mine, I need reminders.
We do have staff that are going out to departments for employees who don't always have computer access or aren't always at a computer. So we've worked with them. Our HR staff has really worked closely with them, working with iPads and other things that will help them be able to take these training sessions when they're online.
Right. And I imagine, given it's a national program, the program itself probably has numbers about what they expect in terms of participation and something to benchmark ourselves against, that we can make sure that we're getting the best utilization that we can, and that we're getting the word out so that people are aware.
We can definitely check with them, but I'm sure that they have something like that. Yes.
Yeah, it'd probably be good just to be able to compare ourselves to other cities. It's obviously helpful benchmark. All right. Thank you. Appreciate the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Then I'm going to go to Councilwoman Vigil-Koppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee members and Director Salazar. And thanks to Councilor Villarreal for asking some of the questions I had. So I think you'll be happy, Mr. Chair, that I don't have a ton. So I had a question because I heard this, and I just want to confirm, Ms. Salazar, is the payroll office moving into HR, being transferred in?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Vigil-Koppler, no.
Okay, thank you. And I guess because of your answers earlier, safety is not being transferred into HR as well, right? They're staying in emergency management?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. When we speak about training and the training dollars, is there an ongoing management training segment in the what did you call it? YouGov or GovU, or I can't remember.
Local GovU.
Local GovU.
Yes, there is.
And so is that mandatory?
It is not mandatory right now. Again, we are working through what courses would be mandatory. And we do want to get to a point where employees who are promoted or new incoming supervisors have some training that is mandatory within a certain period of time of them obtaining that job. So that's something that we want to work towards, yes.
Thank you. Now, I did hear you in your response say that employees had to take harassment training and such. Is sexual harassment part of that?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and is that mandatory?
Again, we need to work with our unions to make sure that, you know, everyone's on the same page when we're talking about mandatory training. I don't particularly think that they will be opposed to that, but of course, if we're making it mandatory, that's something that we need to discuss with them. We are really happy with the overwhelming response that we're getting, that people who just want to take the training and not even saying, you know, if you don't take it by this time, you know, something's going to happen. People want the training, so I don't think that it's going to be a problem, but I do think we need to formalize the mandatory sessions with our union folks through, you know, those discussions, and then through policy with our city manager.
Okay, because you probably know this, most organizations are requiring that sexual harassment be mandatory, especially with what's gone on all over the United States and the Me Too movement. And then, of course, the state legislature, it is mandatory for lobbyists to have sexual harassment training. So you know, it's important, I think, not necessarily the mandatory part. I mean, that I think we should do that, but it's important because it's very costly on the other end when someone, you know, commits an infraction, and then where that leads is not ever a good place to go. And it can be costly. And so it's better to be proactive, I guess is my point, than reactive. And okay, so then back to the supervisory training. Oh, and I should mention that the sexual, I don't believe the personnel rules have changed because they haven't come before, and changes haven't come before the governing body. But I know the sexual harassment section is there, and I don't believe it's mandatory, but you know, I think that may be deserving of another look. Back to the training. So when supervisors take advantage of the supervisory training, which I think is really good, if they're not an experienced, if an employee wants to take supervisory training, but they don't have supervisory experience, nor does their job require it, but I heard you say they can enroll and take the supervisory training. That's right?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Vigil-Koppler, what we're working on is a curriculum with Santa Fe Community College. We're partnering with them because it's a training that would introduce some of the supervisory job requirements to employees who might be interested. So it's a whole programming that we are working with them on that particularly.
Okay, so the question, you know, I think it's valuable to have training, but it's good to make it count for something. So if someone doesn't have supervisory experience, then if they apply for a supervisory position and they don't have the experience, typically they get booted out because they don't qualify. But I was wondering if they've gone through the supervisory training in the city without having had supervisory experience, but they get the training, are the job descriptions written such that they then can qualify with that training? Or are they still at a dead end?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Vigil-Koppler, our job descriptions do not substitute supervisory training for actual experience. It sounds like what you might be talking about is a full-on succession planning, and certainly that's ideal to have in an organization, and having programs for employees to get them ready for that. And that's something definitely that we'd like to look at. So we will look at that. But no, our current job description language does not have that substitution language.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's an important thing, because what in reality, you may have an employee without experience in supervisory role, and then their supervisor leaves, and then they've taken the training, or maybe not, but they've taken or had an opportunity, have taken the training, and then they still can't qualify for the job. So we bring somebody else in over them. And so we kind of stump career ladder, you know, and that then it seems like we could be helping ourselves by building in that succession and the career ladder opportunities rather than bringing somebody else that comes in above the employee who has been there and probably maybe could make a good supervisor, because sometimes those those skills they're behaviorally anchored and people maybe can be very good supervisors if given the opportunity. But that's just a comment. The total, I couldn't really decipher the total amount of money for the contract that we spend on training, whether it's Santa Fe Community College or YouGov or any trainers we might bring in. Is that all in your budget? And how much is that number?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Vihil Coppler, the 100,000 is for training and tuition, and then 50,000 for citywide training. It's not necessarily just for Santa Fe Community College or UNM. As I mentioned to Councilor Villarreal, it could be other trainers that might come and do training for city employees. And then the allocation for local GovU is the 40,000 that I had mentioned.
So local GovU is costing 40,000?
That's what we have allocated. I would need to pull the actual agreement with them, but that's what's allocated for them.
Okay, so we have 100,000, 50,000, and 40,000, or is the 40 and 50 in the 100,000?
No, it's 100, 50, and 40.
Okay, so how do we know if the money that we're spending on training and tuition assistance and the like, how do we know that we're getting benefit out of that from employees?
Well, there's, sorry, go ahead.
How do we know if it's working?
Well, we definitely can keep statistics on, having evaluations after the training to get input from employees. That's one way to measure. You can start doing trending on different categories. So if you continue with certain training topics, do you see a decline in complaints in a certain area? So you can start trending in that regard. You can also measure by a number of employees who are completing their college degrees. So there's a number of ways that you can look at this and track some of these metrics.
And are we doing that?
We are keeping statistics. Yes, we are. We haven't had a lot of training in the last year. We've done some. We've moved some of our money to accommodate some of these trainings, like our supplies or whatever. We're supplementing that to complete these trainings. And then, of course, doing our internal trainings. And we are keeping those statistics, but our tuition assistance budget, of course, we don't have that this year.
Okay. My recollection is the tuition assistance program is in the personnel rules. And so I don't recall what was said earlier about whether that program could be changed, and maybe it can, but I would suggest maybe going to the rules and seeing what the rules are about changing it, or whatever the discussion was earlier. I just thought I'd mention that I recall that it's written in the rules. The last question, Mr. Chair, is about the compensation plan. And I think one of the biggest issues with the compensation plan last time was maybe not necessarily the company, but the readiness of the city by having documentation that had integrity. Because when you put in things to a compensation plan, you give the data to the consultant, and that's the data they work with. And so the best part of it, and I see that you have 15 positions and 4 vacancies. It takes a lot of work, as you know, in an HR office to get ready for a compensation plan. And the readiness is by having all of the job descriptions already updated, having good data, because the company's going to come in and use the data to, do their manipulation, their outreach, to do salary research in our market, in our regional market. So I know that there was a question earlier about when we would implement this, but really, even though the budget starts, it's implemented the July 1st, and you said you'd want it to be effective on any pay raises the following fiscal year. So it's never really too early to start preparing to make sure that the data is solid, and that means essentially the job descriptions are solid, and that takes quite a bit of time. And it concerns me about the vacancies, and I know that in an HR generalist, sometimes they're not always the trained person that can really decipher the job descriptions and that can ask the right questions of the employees and their managers to ensure that that is exactly what the job is and such. So I'm hoping that you will have the staff ready to do that. And then I'm coupling this with the consultant that the city had come in a long time ago, Garza, and he said we have over 400 and some job descriptions. Maybe we have more now because the city's changed a bit. And his recommendation was that we really needed to whittle those down to be reasonable. And I agreed with that. I don't know if we've made any headway with that or not, but that goes to my point about having job descriptions that have integrity, in that they are the most up-to-date that we could possibly have. And so I'm not sure if this is going to require another consultant to help do that or not, but because of your vacancy issue that you have now, but that could be something that you consider as an amendment in the future, because I know it's not in here now. And that is to make sure that when the compensation plan is finished, that it is the best, most accurate, defensible plan possible. And that's only if the preparation that's gone into it is that same way. So, it may be something for you to think about in the future, unless you have that on staff. And then one last point that I just will say is, it's important when we continue to hire compensation consultants, and this is, I guess, from my own experience, you learn the process, you learn how it's done. And eventually, and I know some of the counselors have heard me say this before, you can actually do these yourself in the future, because it's not, once you learn and how it's done, it's not hard. It's a workload, but it's not hard to do them yourselves. Then that way you save the consultant money, and you continue to keep your own classification and comp plan the most up to date, because you're the ones, the HR office really are the ones that really know that this data is good data, because you're doing the front end work anyway, and that's really a lot of the work. So I mean, it's a potential savings. I agree with hiring consultants, but if we don't take the opportunity to learn how we're implementing it and how they're doing it, we may be missing an opportunity to not only save a bunch of money, but also keep our data up to date and regular, and employees paid in a fair manner. So I believe, Mr. Chair, I wanted to know one more thing. Do you happen to know what the turnover rate is for the city?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Vigil-Koppler, no, not off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that number for you.
Well, I mean, I always think that's a good measure. And so I know that it's a calculation and it would take some time, but I just wondered if you knew. All right, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back to committee member Cassette Sanchez, then Councilor Garcia, and then I'm going to ask for a motion. I'd really like to try to get to the finance department. So if we have to move that above IT, we will before 4 o'clock, because as you know, Ms. McCoy may not be around after today. So let's wrap this up and then let's get into finance. So Councilmember Cassette Sanchez and then Councilor Garcia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just have one quick question, and it is a referral back to when the union had spoken to us. And there was one concern that they brought up, which they said that management had recently and already been granted raises. Can you please provide information there? Have raises already been granted to our management team or our directors?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Cassette Sanchez, there are some not across the board raises have not been implemented. If someone is promoted or something like that, they may see a salary increase. So we will address that with the union. They did raise that during a regular monthly meeting with them. So we will address that with them.
Okay, so just if anybody's received raises, it's due to a promotion. Anybody who's staying in their position, raises are contingent upon us approving this budget. And then they would get them at the same time, correct?
There could be promotional raises or anything else consistent with a collective bargaining agreement or a policy, yes.
Yeah, that was my only question. I appreciate clarifying that.
Okay, Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director McCoy, Director McCoy, as well as Director Salazar for affording me the opportunity to ask some questions. I know that last summer when we were reviewing the city reorganization plan, one of the benefits that was constantly touted was career growth. And this opportunity for professional development and a career ladders will be established, and employees will have that career mobility. And so with that being said, I know you've mentioned there's $50,000 for training. How much of that is going to be absorbed by mandatory training?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Garcia, the mandatory training that we'd like to institute by working with our unions, I think we can accomplish through the local GovU contract and then also with our internal staff. So I think that's already covered. So the additional funding that's being requested for citywide training would be available for that job growth.
Okay, great. I just want to ensure that we're putting adequate resources to ensure that folks do have the opportunity to access professional development opportunities, and we can keep talent within the city. I guess the next question, and this is something if you wouldn't mind helping unpack this for me. With the current proposed pay raises, from this presentation, I've learned that there's now two different, what I would call classifications, and the AFSCME employees as well as non-union employees. The AFSCME employees are proposed to receive what is being touted as equivalent to 4% raise. So can you tell me what that all entails? Is the 4% includes what benefits, how are we calculating that total? And at the end of the day, what is the take-home increases that AFSCME employees would receive?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Garcia, I'll start out with how it works with the negotiating with the unions, and then I'll let Mary talk about the allocation. So basically, once an allocation is made, we get to the table with the bargaining unit, whether it be AFSCME or police or fire, and we're working within the confines of that budget. So it's equivalent to a 4%. And again, I'll let Mary talk about the allocation in just a minute. but they can come to the table with different proposals that may or may not be the 4%, but it can't exceed that budgeted amount. But definitely we're not imposing the 4% on them. We're just saying this is the allocation, and then the actual amounts would be negotiated.
Thank you, Director Salazar. To elaborate on that, I do just want to point out that the calculation for the 4% for the salary increase and the salary dependent benefits is the same across union and non-union, whether it's AFSCME, POA, or the fire union, and any of our non-union classifications. We did, just as a side note, the directors are not receiving a 4% salary increase. They're receiving a 3% salary increase. So if we talk about every city employee minus the directors receiving the 4% salary increase, we are looking at the exact same calculation. We take your hourly salary, we add 4% to that, which then changes your annual salary, which then will impact some of those salary dependent benefits, which would include, as I've mentioned, para, retiree healthcare, anything that is dependent on your hourly or annual wages. So that being said, those calculations are run exactly the same for all non-director positions to account for that 4%. So for the union, for the 3 unions that we have, we did that calculation for every single member that it would be eligible to receive an increase as of July 1st. So, and Director Salazar, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that would mean that you would have to be off of probation in order to receive that salary increase by the beginning of the fiscal year. So taking that calculation for all employees across all bargaining units, we then calculated which salary dependent benefits and the cost of the salary dependent benefits for that 4% increase. So those two totals the amount equivalent of a 4% increase in the amount, the corresponding amount for the salary dependent benefits is what we have put together to total the 1.2 million for the AFSCME collective bargaining reserve that is currently in the Human Resources Department budget. So that is those two, and as Director Salazar outlined, that is then subject to the collective bargaining process that could be distributed differently among the members that are eligible for a salary increase, but it is important that we do the calculation for both the salary increase as well as the salary dependent benefits as well, since that is a cost that we will incur.
Thank you so much, Director McCoy. I really appreciated that thorough review. And just so I'm understanding correctly, the AFSCME 4% increase includes benefits, whereas the non-union employee 4% increase does not include benefits.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, our budget includes both the salary increase as well as the cost for the salary dependent benefits for all employees, whether it's union or non-union or the directors. The salary dependent benefits that do increase with any percentage increase to a salary have to be accounted for by the city. And if we're going to have an increase in our para payments or retiree healthcare payments, we do have to factor that into the budget as well. So they are calculated. It's the same methodology across the board. It's just to respect to the collective bargaining process, we do set aside that amount for the 3 unions into a reserve. So it is subject to negotiation. Whereas with the non-union and the directors increase, that is already built into the budget. Again, the calculation is the exact same for every single employee.
Okay, thank you so much. And the only reason I'm asking is in the presentation earlier, I don't recall seeing when it mentioned non-union, the equivalency of 4%, whereas it was mentioned for the AFSCME employees. But so I thank you for that clarification. I really appreciate it. No other questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to ask questions.
Sure, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just follow up on the question about the the union. So you can offer them a certain percentage, but then that has to be negotiated, right, Ms. Salazar? And they could choose to use that 4% in any way they choose. It could be COLAs, it could be any number of things. They could decide to use that 4% for something else. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Rivera, yes, the allocated budget amount is subject to negotiations.
Right. So for non-union, we can implement whatever can fit into the budget, and that could be implemented July 1st because it doesn't need to be negotiated. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Rivera, non-union increases would be effective the first full pay period in July.
All right. So that's the difference, is that management raises or non-union raises can be done immediately, and the raises for anyone in the bargaining unit have to be negotiated, whether it's AFSCME, police, or fire. That's correct, right?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Rivera, yes, those raises have to be made. The good news is we are in negotiations with all three unions right now.
Yeah, but they have the option of deciding which way they're going to go with it. Okay. The other question I had, the last question I had was, well, I guess not a question, but a comment, is that on the flip side of that is if you do furloughs, we can do furloughs to management and have it at a higher rate or a higher percentage or a higher number of hours than the union, because again, they're non-union. We can implement what we want. So some that's the trade-off, I guess, is that not being part of the union, we can implement certain things on non-union that we can't necessarily do on union. But then this on the other side, raises have to go through that process. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Rivera, yes, those salary increases would have to go through the union.
All right. I think that's all I have for now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move to approve?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Counselor Beta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are going to move to the finance department budget. Ms. McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, councilors. I'm going to do, in the interest of time, I'm going to do a brief overview and then jump into the PowerPoint. Wanted to highlight the amazing work that our finance staff has done to support city operations amidst our local restrictions. We've been able to maintain our 21 operational requirements while also processing $17.5 million in federal CARES Act money within about 3.5 months. Staff within the last year has developed 3 different budgets, transitioned to remote work and remote processing of many of our financial functions, such as electronic contracts, RFPs, procurement, that type of a thing. So again, as we've been able to maintain our operational current year operations, we are closing out our fiscal year 20. The good news is we have submitted our trial balance, our financials to the auditor as of March 31st. Our external auditor has already begun to assess those financials, and we still have a goal of completing our FY20 audit by June 30th. That being said, we have also completed a very significant milestone. As you know, in FY20, the first year that we implemented the Tyler Munis system. So with the close of fiscal year 20 by our staff and staff citywide, that really rounds out the end of the first year of implementation of that new financial system. So that's the good news. We do anticipate the highlights of our FY22 budget is we do anticipate additional workload going into the new fiscal year because of not only of COVID, but of the federal funds and of our increasing budget going into fiscal year 22. So that's really where you see our investments are prioritized. That being said, we are allocating new positions across divisions to manage this additional workload, again, created by the substantial federal funding opportunities, the external and internal audits that we have managed, as well as the increase in procurement, budget adjustments, and the implementation of this new technology. That we do have a significant investment that I will review with you in audit preparation to submit a timely audit and in grant support as well. That being said, if you can flip to the next slide, this outlines some of those additional FTE as well as the $500,000 to support our audit preparation. Next slide, please. So I'll go ahead and continue taking you department or division by division. The first division that we have is the Finance Administration Division. This division is increasing by approximately $385,000, mainly due to an increase in the services to other departments for the Finance Department. And this, as Councilor Villarreal has guided us through understanding this, is mainly due to increased ITT and fleet costs that are assessed out to the city's different departments and different funds. In addition to that, we are requesting that about $200,000 in additional salaries and benefits to fill a vacant assistant finance director position that was frozen in the current year, as well as adding one new fiscal administrator position. It's one of the 8 that we are proposing to add in FY22. That position will support an increase in contracts and purchases and payments throughout our department. The accounting division is set to increase by about $750,000. The significant investment here is $500,000 in additional support for our audit preparation. We do have a goal next year of submitting our audit on time by the middle of December to the state auditor's office. In addition to that, we are adding 2 new accounting positions to be able to assist with the ongoing day-to-day work that we have throughout our department and throughout all departments, in addition to processing our additional federal funding. As the budget division is showing a significant increase of $1.4 million. This is in part due to adding 1 budget analyst position, which will assist in managing the additional federal revenue, which is budgeted, as well as monitoring our on an ongoing basis, our budget and our revenues throughout FY22. We will, as we have mentioned several times, we do expect several budget adjustments as we're going forward, not just for this year, but through FY22 as well. So that is an increase in our workload, as well as managing those federal funds. In addition, there are increases due to changes in transfers. This is the majority of that $1.3 million increase. That $1.3 million increase is due to transfers to different funds that are processed through this particular division. So if you have any questions, we can go over that with you. The fleet management division is set to increase by about $170,000. That's to fill 2 vacant positions. Our grants management division, this is set to increase about $250,000. This is for additional support that we are anticipating having to bring on to process the additional federal funding. Again, there's about $15 million that we're expecting alone from the American Rescue Plan. And then, as other divisions have mentioned to you, we are already receiving notification from our federal partners, whether it's streets or affordable housing, that there will be additional allocations directly to those departments from their federal agencies. Payroll division includes a small increase of approximately $18,000. This is, we have had a difficult time filling our payroll manager position, but we are in need of additional temp assistance in the payroll division because they do maintain bi-weekly processing of payroll. And so in order to support that process, it's a lot to handle for 2 employees. Unfortunately, we've tried to fill the payroll manager several times and have not been able to find a competitive candidate. And so we're planning on bringing on additional temp support to support that bi-weekly payroll process. Our purchasing division, we see an increase of $186,000. That's to support 2 additional positions to assist with the workload, from everything from requests for proposals and invitations to bid to additional work that we expect with the increase in budget, increase in federal contracts, increase in our capital outlay funding from the state. Our risk management division is set to increase by about $200,000. That's mainly because we added 1 new position that is funded not from the general fund, but from the risk fund. That risk fund that gets assessed out to all departments. We are managing, this position will manage the risk claim costs citywide in all departments by providing more detailed and updated reports and corrective action plans to our departments that we are seeing with high cost claims that are coming through the city. And finally, our treasury division. Our treasury division is adding approximately $300,000. There are additional positions here. This was a position that we outlined in the fiscal impact report that would be necessary with the changes in the legislation that you reviewed last night for the lodger's tax ordinance. We do expect additional workload from those changes, additional taxpayers to come onto our rolls. In addition, we do plan on having this position support collections and tax compliance. As we reviewed with you on Tuesday, we do have an uptick in taxpayers that have not paid, and we are very concerned about that particular tax revenue source throughout the recovery period. It's extremely vital to departments like tourism and arts and culture. And we are also funding, this is probably one of the hardest hit departments with vacant positions. So we are funding 2 vacant positions in addition to adding that new lodger's tax compliance position. That totals the $300,000. With that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for questions.
Okay, questions for Ms. McCoy? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Director McCoy, and for all the details. That was a lot. So I know we're getting tired. Can you just remind me, there's 8 positions, 2 accounting positions, there's a senior budget analyst. That's not the same thing as, did I hear you say assistant finance director? Or am I like hearing things now?
Lawrence, if you can scroll to the screen above. So I was trying to identify the vacant positions that were being filled versus the positions, the new positions that we're adding. So let's start with the new positions that are on this table. So we have a current position count of 50. We're proposing to add 8. Those 8 are outlined as follows. 2 accounting positions that will live in our accounting department to assist with the ongoing day-to-day activities and the month closes, the quarter closes, as well as the fiscal year end closes. In addition, because of the increase in workload for our budget division, we're recommending 1 senior budget analyst position be added. And in addition to that, to support our entire department, we are recommending a fiscal administrator. This person will assist with processing our day-to-day bills, invoices, making sure we have to go through the same contracting and procurement processes as every single other department. So we need that support in-house. In addition, 2 procurement positions to support the work that Fran and her team does. So this has been a consistent investment that this council has made over the course of the last 2 to 3 years by continuously adding positions. So this would be a great assistance, not just for the workload, the increased workload, but again, with federal funds and capital outlay funds. But again, the additional training that team has done, the work that they have assumed by taking the procurement and the contracting process all electronic, this has really been an additional burden throughout the last year. And of course, we would like to continue that electronic processing, as we move forward.
Is that procurement, does that then become 4 people in procurement total, or what's the number now for that?
Let me pull that for you. That would then combine, I believe we have 4 in there currently.
Oh, good.
So then that would become 6.
Excellent. Good to know. All right. And then the next one for staffing new was risk management position.
Correct. And so there are claims costs that are span across all different departments for insurance purposes. So we have long identified this as an area that we wanted to focus on to be able to start to control the cost of those claims for the city. Very similar to the health insurance costs, as Todd showed us with Aon, there's been a pattern of increased costs for our health insurance. We understand that this is a cost burden for the city, and if we're able to start to control it through additional trainings or through additional corrective action with the departments that are driving those costs, it'll be much better for the city fiscally going forward. So it's more of a proactive measure. Same with lodgers tax compliance with this position. Again, we know the significant hit that the lodgers tax revenue has taken, and in part, the deferrals that were allowed under the emergency orders. Completely understand, why we had to do that on a policy level, but now it will take additional effort for those collections, in addition to the changes that were made to the ordinance last night, which will require additional processing of those tax payments.
Got it. What position am I missing?
So 2 accounting positions, 1 budget position, 1 fiscal position, 2 procurement positions, 1 risk position, and 1 lodgers tax compliance position.
Okay. And then the ones that were already existing to fill was assistant finance director, and what was the other one?
Correct. There. Let me go ahead and review those with you. Let me pull that up the list. We are preparing a list of, that councilors have requested for our FY22 budget of not just the positions for finance, but across all of our departments. And we're listing, the funding status. So you are able to see, the change if it was a position that was frozen in the current fiscal year, and if we're funding it, or if it will continue to remain frozen in future years. So we do have 1 budget analyst position that was frozen in the current fiscal year that we have allocated funding to fill. And then we have 1 assistant finance director position that was also frozen in the current fiscal year that we're recommending funding to fill. We actually have 1 auto mechanic position in our fleet division that was frozen in the current year that we are also recommending funding to fill. We have 2 positions in our treasury division that were frozen in the current fiscal year that we are recommending to fill. One of them is a cashier position that will greatly assist our treasury staff to be able to man the cashier's office. They've been doing an excellent job throughout the year with minimal staff at manning the cashier's office at City Hall. And so that will be of great assistance and directly impact the public.
Great. Is that all? It's a lot.
That is a lot. We did have a high vacancy rate. We did have a lot of frozen positions in the current year.
Okay. And then those new positions, are those positions we've had in the past? Do you know?
Not to my knowledge. I think, we've had the conversation year after year during, this budget time about procurement and really what the right size of procurement staff is for the size of operation that we're at. And we constantly compare ourselves to the county. The county has a smaller budget, but more procurement staff. Similarly, we, with our accounting staff as well, we know we need additional assistance in our accounting division, not just this the contractual support to hire in our certified public accountants to be able to assist us to have that on-time audit, but just other accounting staff to be able to manage the day-to-day processing. Cash, it impacts all different departments, and the cash team, that we have is really kind of bare bones at the moment, and they've been doing an excellent job maintaining current operations and closing FY20. We're very thankful to them, but they definitely need additional supports.
Got it. Which oversees RFPs, like the, not grant applications, say departments have to go through submittals, people are submitting for RFPs, etc. Who oversees that process?
It's the city's purchasing division, so Fran Dunaway and her staff.
Okay, so that procurement support, that will help with this?
Yes, actually one position Fran has flagged to assist with RFPs specifically.
That's great to know. All right, I think that's where there's a gap there that I think needs to be filled. And
Absolutely. And I think just to be able to brag on our staff a bit, they have processed 16 RFPs already to date. There are 8 currently in process and 8 more that are pending issuance. That's a significant process that we have to go through. And I think someone asked earlier, what is the turnaround time, right? If we add additional staffing and that expertise, we can hopefully shrink that turnaround time for the RFPs and the contract process. But again, it's a balance, right? We need additional staff to handle the workload, but we're also expecting an increase in the workload. Every single capital dollar, that's a significant project. Every single federal dollar that comes in that we're going to have to procure.
The federal piece and then the local aspects that we have that I think just, we don't want to drop any balls. So that's great to hear. The internal auditor, is that in your office or where is that housed again?
Mr. Chair, Counselor, that's a great question. It's actually in the city manager's office. It is $150,000 is allocated for the internal audit function. The city a few years ago decided to outsource the internal audit function because of the problems that the organization had with the in-house management of internal audits. And so REDW is currently conducting, is wrapping up an internal audit of the Public Utilities Department, is currently conducting an internal audit of the Information Technology Department as well. So that is something we would look forward to presenting to you in the coming months.
Okay. Well, I'll ask more of those questions for city manager. And then just to wrap up the contract work, other than Dr. White's contract, what other financial contractual services can we expect?
So the significant investment that we see, the $500,000 in audit support. So that'll be coming through as contracts. Again, we are planning to hire certified public accountants that are experts in reconciling cash, experts, in the different areas for the year-end close. In addition, looking forward to what our workload will be in FY22 with the additional federal funding coming our way and the additional opportunities to apply for federal funding. We are allocating additional grants, contracts for assistance with our the technical aspects of our grants management.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, other questions? Is there a motion regarding the finance department budget?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Counselor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Counselor Beta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so it is 4:04, so that'll conclude our hearings for this week. We will pick up on Tuesday, April 20th with the ITT department, and then get on to our regular scheduled items, which are community engagement, city clerk, council and constituent services, general government, municipal court, mayor, city attorney, and city manager. Thank you all. Have a good weekend. We're adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.